Does heart cancer exist? Tumors can develop in practically all organs in the body. But have you ever heard of someone who had heart cancer? Could it be that one of the most important organs is immune to this insidious disease? A normal cell usually becomes a cancerous cell only after undergoing several mutations, which are changes in its DNA. This mostly happens during cell division, when the existing damage continues to replicate. However, heart muscle cells divide only rarely. The heart mostly retains the same cellular composition we had at birth. Exceptions occur only when the tissues are somehow damaged. Tumors, on the other hand, are most common in organs that need frequent renewal. For example, the skin, whose cells are often damaged by the sun's UV radiation. However, this does not mean that heart cancer does not exist at all. It is simply quite rare compared to other types. Does one horse have 1 horsepower? How many horses does it have? The horsepower unit has disappeared from most areas. But it still remains in use for cars and motorcycles. But how should we understand it? If we turned off the engine and hitched up a certain number of living animals, would the machine's performance be the same? The term horsepower was introduced by Scottish physicist James Watt, when he improved one of the key inventions of the time, the steam engine. To popularize it, he needed to compare it to something people were familiar with. Watt calculated how long it took a horse to turn a mill wheel. That is, how many kilograms it could move 1 meter in a certain amount of time. And finally defined 1 horsepower as 14,968.55 kilograms of work per minute. Of course, the comparison can't be taken literally, because a horse can sometimes perform work 10 times greater. And on the other hand, 5 horses pulling together won't do the work of 5 horsepower, because they get in each other's way. Accuracy, however, wasn't Watt's main concern. The point was to convince people that machines were much stronger than horses. Does hot tea warm us up in the freezing cold? When we come back frozen from outside and need to warm up, we have some tea, or any hot drink. But does it really help, or does it just seem that way? Do you feel the warmth flowing through your whole body after drinking it? Some experts, however, warn that this feeling is only temporary. For example, British neuroscientist Peter McNaughton explains that when we drink something hot, the receptors on our tongue immediately go on alert. It's too hot, they send a message to the brain, which then starts to act. It orders the body to start sweating, which cools it down. Such hot tea can then have the completely opposite effect, and that's why it is sometimes recommended to drink it in summer instead of cold beverages. And what about alcohol? That doesn't warm us up much either. Even though our blood vessels expand and we feel warmth in the body, the effect fades quickly and we can actually get cold faster. How long are all the roads on Earth? Highways, expressways, small regular roads, and even tiny little roads. If you are a passionate driver and wish to drive on every single one that has ever been built on the planet, how many kilometers would await you? The latest data on the total length of all roads on Earth comes from 2018, when it was published by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. The total length of all terrestrial roads is 64.3 million kilometers. So if you line them all up end to end, you could circle the planet 1,600 times around the equator. The longest road network is in the US -6.8 million kilometer, second is India, 6.3 million kilometer, and third is China, 5.2 million kilometer. Will light travel through space forever? The glow of some stars traveled for billions of years before it was seen by our eyes or Earth-based telescopes. And from us, it will continue on. Will it keep traveling, and thus shining, forever, or can something stop it? Light differs fundamentally from sound. Sound cannot travel endlessly, because it is carried by vibrations in the material or medium it passes through. Part of the energy is converted into heat by the vibration of the particles in that medium, and the sound wave gradually fades away. Light, on the other hand, can travel through empty space. It doesn't need any carrier. Its energy doesn't decrease or disappear, regardless of how far it has already traveled. If light were to travel through a perfect vacuum and didn't encounter any object, it would theoretically travel forever. However, since it spreads out in all directions along the way, the intensity of the source weakens from our perspective, just like sound. Which is actually a good thing, because if the light from a giant star reached us in all its full brilliance, we would go blind in an instant. Do animals recognize themselves in the mirror? What might animals be thinking in front of a mirror? Do they even recognize themselves in it? When we look in a mirror and see our face smeared with paint, we start wiping it off. We simply know that we normally look different. A similar test, developed by American psychologist Gordon G. Gallup in 1970, is often used by scientists on animals. Any animal that passes is capable of self-awareness, and therefore its intelligence is actually close to that of humans. In the 1970s, scientists painted the faces of anesthetized chimpanzees white and, once awake, placed them in front of a mirror. The apes immediately began wiping off the paint, and gorillas and orangutans reacted the same way. Dolphins, orcas, and elephants also passed the mirror self-recognition test. When a giant mirror was installed in the elephant enclosure at the zoo in New York, the elephants even repeated various movements in front of it or looked inside their mouths. On the other hand, pandas, parrots, crows, and octopuses do not recognize themselves in the mirror. Nor do cats or dogs. Most of them just stare into it with a strange curiosity, much like the youngest children. How much space would all the people on Earth take up? We often hear that there are more and more people on the planet and that soon there won't be enough room for us. But in reality, it's not that dramatic. If we made a few compromises, there would still be plenty of space left. How much space one person takes up is, of course, relative. Body proportions can vary a lot. But if we tried to average it out, let's say 5 of us could fit into 1 square meter. That means each person would have 0.2 square meters. Currently, there are about 7.8 billion people in the world, and in this tight formation, we would need 1.6 billion square meter. We can imagine that as a square with sides 40,000 meters long, that is, 40 kilometers. Doesn't that suddenly seem quite small? In other words, all the people in the world could fit into an area roughly the size of London. How much air do we breathe in a day? We need quite a lot to stay alive. If we narrowed it down to the absolute essentials, we couldn't survive without food, water, and a truly substantial amount of fresh air. So how much air do our lungs use in a single day? The total lung capacity in men is up to 6 liters of air. For women, it's a bit less, and for athletes, it's more. With a normal inhale and exhale, about half a liter of air is exchanged. So if we breathe 15 times per minute, more than 21,000 times a day, nearly 11,000 liters of air are exchanged in our body every single day. That would be enough to inflate more than 1,000 children's carnival balloons. Our lungs really work hard, but they are well equipped for the task. For effective air exchange, they contain about 500 million alveoli, tiny air sacs whose walls are made of a thin single-cell lining. If we were to cut the lungs open and spread out the surface of all the alveoli like a carpet, we could cover an entire 4-room apartment. The surface area of the respiratory membrane is estimated to be around 80 square meters. Why are peaches fuzzy? The peach and the nectarine are like sisters. They are similar in many ways, but still different. While the nectarine was blessed with beautiful, smooth skin. Just like apples, tomatoes, or cherries, the peach is unattractively fuzzy. Does that make any sense? It definitely does. The fuzzy surface of a peach is designed down to the last detail. Oh, the last detail. First of all, it's great protection against pests. Insects don't cling to ripe fruit as easily, the fuzz is unpleasant for them, and they will think twice before deciding whether the peach will be their lunch today. Secondly, the peach skin acts like a kind of natural preserve. Droplets of water from the environment get trapped between the hairs and don't penetrate inside so quickly. Otherwise, the peach would rot quickly in damp conditions. When fossilized peach pits dating back to the end of the Tertiary period are found in China, it turns out that peaches similar to today's ones were already growing 5 million years ago. And where did smooth nectarines come from? According to recent genetic studies, they originated from peaches, but underwent a certain mutation over time. Since when is north on top? Would you ever think to look for north at the bottom of a map and south at the top? Today's typical arrangement hasn't always been the standard. Who decided where the cardinal directions would be placed on maps or compasses? If you looked at a map from ancient Arabs or Chinese, you would actually find south at the top. North was probably placed on top for the first time by the ancient astronomer Claudius Ptolemy. Most likely because most of the known world at that time was located in the northern hemisphere. And the upper part of drawings is simply easier to examine. However, this wasn't a rule yet. On some medieval maps, east is at the top, because that's where the sacred city of Jerusalem lies. North gradually gained importance, even from an astronomical perspective. After all, the night sky rotates around a point near the North Star. But even today, you can still come across reversed maps with south on top, for example, in Australia.